Protocol observed. Good morning, everybody. Okay, wow. Let me start by saying that I also used to be in the seminary. So I joined the I joined the Oblates of Mary Immaculate back in 1990, and I spent 3 years in the seminary. And I think God has a different plan, obviously. So now I'm married with 2 children, and I'm into entrepreneurship from the corporate world, doing business for the last about 21 years. And so today I'm going to talk about systems thinking. I'm coming from the background of compliance and certification. And but first of all, let's define what is systems thinking, by the way. So, and how do we use this for philanthropy? I think you can just please click. So systems thinking is an integrative way, so to view large and complex issues as part of a group of systems. So it's composed of different elements that function together as a whole. Okay, quite a very straightforward definition. So let's look at the example. For example, this hotel is a system. So there's a system of receiving guests. There's a system on housekeeping, a system on how they serve food. Up to the time that we leave, the hotel has satisfied the clients. If we look at the human body, it's also a system. It's composed of different elements. So we have the DNA, the tissue, the muscles, the different organs working together. And think about it. If you disrupt one of these elements, you would basically disrupt the human body. You cannot say, oh, forget about it. It's just a toothache. It will not affect. I can still stand up and talk. One small element within a group of system would definitely affect the whole. And bring this to philanthropy. But before we go there, what about economy? An economy is also a system. It's composed of policies, governance, behavior, external forces, demands, supply. All these are elements composing that system. And there are also systems that can exist within a system. For example, in Bangkok, it's one dynamic, vibrant city. It's one huge system. But it's also composed of different systems within. You have local government units, municipalities, the tourism office, and so on and so forth. So the key takeaway here is that systems are everywhere and they exist at various scales. If you bring this to philanthropy, it makes you think about what are these different elements that we can analyze so that the way we do philanthropy is systemic. It's not like linear thinking that we all tend to do. Yeah, next slide, please. And let's define it further. I did mention linear thinking. This is our tendency, basically. So linear thinking, unlike systems thinking, has inputs and outputs. So it asks the question, where does it start? And where will it end? For example, you're drinking that bottle of water today. If you're thinking systematic, in a linear way, you'd ask, where did that come from? And you'd probably, well, it came from F&B. And it's screened by the food safety assurance auditor. And it was provided by a vendor. It came from a factory, and so on and so forth. So it has a start, and it ends somewhere, and that's basically on your table. On the other hand, if we look at circular thinking, yeah, next slide, please. So circular thinking, but before that, this is one very good tool for systemic thinking, the iceberg, and I'm sure you're familiar with this. So we always look at events. So you catch a cold, but then you ask, why did we catch cold? Because we slept late, right? And why are you sleeping less these days? Because we have a lot of work to do. And so why do you stress over so much work? Because I'm so career focused. I have goals as far as career is concerned. And so this is one way to think about things. No, it's linear. It starts somewhere, it ends somewhere. It is caused by something, and then you have an effect. So, for example, you ask, why do we have few funders, or why is our community development projects not as successful as we thought it should be. What's causing that? And what you normally see are just basically events. There are so many underlying factors that you may probably miss. Maybe the competence of your staff, maybe the buy-in of stakeholders, maybe you lack engagement among different interested parties in your advocacy, for example. Yeah, next slide, please. So that's linear thinking. Now, if we look at circular thinking, this one is quite different. So circular thinking, while linear thinking has inputs and outputs, circular thinking can basically have the same input and output, right? So it's basically the same, and there is no specified end. Yeah, next slide. And there is a continuous feedback among each element. So, for example, case in point, you have, let's say, can you go back to this? Okay, that one. So, for example, a pizza delivery chain, they operate as a business, they want to increase profits, and so they make sure that they have sales, so the volume increases. And so when that happens, the more they get sales, it increases profits, but then again, it would also create excessive delivery times, right? And that would require a lot of logistical requirements, and then they will invest into new pizza infrastructure. This could cause delay because the owners would hesitate to invest, and that would affect the quality of pizza, would affect the sales volume, and probably it would also affect their process. It has no end, no? Meaning you see there that the outputs basically are also the inputs of another loop. And when we bring that into philanthropy, I think it's the same thing. No, we can basically apply the same concept. I was paying attention to yesterday's discussion, and I think Dr. Glenda mentioned that systemic issues should also be addressed in a systemic manner. There's a saying that you cannot expect to see different results if you keep on doing the same old things. That's stupidity, right? I mean, you have to approach it in a totally different way. Yeah, next slide, please. And so systems dynamics also is important here. How are the elements interacting? So if you look at your philanthropy, what are the different elements there? Father JP, right, presented a very good case study yesterday. And there's so many elements within that parish, within that hospital. And so the first thing we need to do here is to basically try to understand and identify all those elements. Who the stakeholders are, who are the interested parties, patients, students, volunteers, interns, funders, regulators, and what do they need and expect from us? If we do not understand those, we could not create a system for that, right? And then finally, what desired output do we want out of our system? What is the goal of the system? That's why I also asked this question. I had this opportunity to sit down in breakfast with one of you, and I asked them, so what really is the desired goal? If you only have one very important metric, what would that be? And the answer I think I got is amount of fund raised, right? Am I correct? Amount of fund raised. And I think that's right, no? Because earlier during the mass, I think that was also one of the message, like we are all solicitors, and I think we measure our success through the amount that we have solicited. So is that the desired output, or is that the only desired output among many other outputs? We also need to be very clear, right? Because yes, you can have the fund, but then the project will fail because the competency of the project team working on the project is also not included as part of our output. So in other words, there could be also outputs here or metrics that we need to consider. Yeah, next slide, please. And so there is International Organization for Standardization. And this is my world. How many of you here are certified to ISO, by the way? Except for Dr. Philip Tan, whom I work with and he's been implementing ISO for the last 25 years. No, so ISO, the business model of ISO is really anchored deeply into systems thinking. And there's so many ISO standards developed by ISO. And ISO basically is a non-governmental organization like most of us here. And so their mandate is to develop, to research, and to publish voluntary standards. It's composed of approximately 168 countries, Thailand, is pretty much into standardization. The Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, of course, and the US and Europe. So this hotel is basically certified to standard. They're also certified to ISO 9001. They have ISO standards for food safety and all that. No? But next slide, please. And like I said, ISO develops all these different standards. And why am I showing these initial standards to you? For example, I think most of you are operating schools. Did you know that there's a specific standard for schools? And that is the, can we go back to that, please? Sorry. There's ISO 21001, which is basically your standard for systems thinking for school. Yeah, next slide. This one, yeah, okay, just, and this is the ISO standard for schools. This one, just pause right there. This is Educational Organization Management System. So, meaning to say, ISO standardization works this way. So it goes through, it's systems thinking, but it's certified. It goes through 3 layers of certification. So we have what we call first-party audit, second-party audit, and third-party audit. I'm a third-party auditor. We audit different systems. I also do second-party audit. So, next slide, please. So what we do here is that looking at the standards developed by ISO, which is basically linked to the SDG goals, right? This frameworks is basically aligned to the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. It all started with these basic questions. What's the best way of doing this? And they provided this framework through international standards that we can all adopt. So when you implement this, you can go through certification audits and you can maintain that standards, of course, by making sure that you achieve those desired results. So folks ask me and say, why do we really need to be certified? You know, the concept of certification is like this. When you say that you are beautiful, that's the kind of, okay, maybe, but if someone else says you're beautiful, that's a different thing, right? So in a way, that's how certification works. A third person goes there and say, hey, you have very good processes. You have policies, structures, control, and all that. No? So, yeah, next slide, please. Okay. Now, we did mention earlier that systems thinking is composed of different elements. No? So specifically, let's say for educational organization management system, or even just for our philanthropy, it is also governed by different elements. And so I cannot, for the interest of time, dive into these elements. So from clause 4 to clause 10. So clause 4 is context of the organization. I think one of you yesterday was talking about strategy. And context of the organization is really all about strategy. It's about understanding where are you good at, where do you need to improve, what are threats, what are opportunities out there. And so you basically start from that. So your PDOs, for example, need to go back to that SWOT analysis, which you would probably find boring, but it's something that you really need to seriously consider because that defines basically your context. And that is just one of the elements in the systems thinking approach. Another element, of course, is leadership. So I'm not going to dive deeper into that, but when you implement all this, yeah, can we go to the next slide, please? When you dive into all of this, you implement this in a plan, do, check, act manner. So this is the circular thinking, systems thinking. Yeah, next slide, please. Okay, so can we just, so you plan, you implement, you evaluate, and basically you improve and go back to the plan again. It has no end, like we said in systems thinking earlier. And ISO, can we click on the next slide, please? Provided all of these elements within the circular thinking, which we can all use as a guide. So the idea here is that when we conform to this globally accepted standard, we are basically leaving systems thinking. It becomes a way of life for you, regardless of whatever your desired goals are, increasing funds, increasing the effectiveness of your programs through this systems thinking approach. And you see there clause 4, that's basically the SWOT. And if you're running a school, you start with who your learners are, what are their needs, expectations, and requirements, what basically is needed in your community. And so you develop the system out of that. No? So yeah, next slide. No, can you just click on the button, please? Okay, so, and then, of course, you're going to use different processes. Yep, next. And then just stop right there, okay? You're going to identify all these processes within that system. So, in a nutshell, are you still with me? Okay, so I usually talk about this for 5 days straight. Now I'm going to compress everything in 15 minutes. and so and so you have to look at your PDO, right? Your philanthropic development office structure. Look at all the elements. Start from the SWOT analysis. Go to who are your interested parties, both internally and externally. What are their needs, expectations, and requirements? And what are the processes you need to put in place? Okay? So, like I said, this hotel has a lot of different processes. You just don't know it. We're sitting here comfortably, but there's millions of processes behind this hotel running as one cohesive system. And that's also how we run the philanthropy. No, the hotel has very clear outcome, and that's about guests satisfied with the experience. And that's also the same manner when we run philanthropy. Start with that end in mind, right? And so you then identify all this process, go through the systems thinking of planning, implementing, evaluating it, and improving it. And when you do that, in the world of ISO, you can actually close your eyes and predict that that's going to happen. The results of the systems thinking basically is exactly that. We have a process formula called R plus R equals C, where C stands for consistency. And that's what we all desire in philanthropy. Consistent funding, consistent impact, consistent accountability. And how do we achieve that? By putting systems in place. And to simplify that, putting processes in place. Pretty much like the human body with so many elements that works as a process, right? So what's your most important process in philanthropy, by the way? I would guess the answer is, again, solicitation, fundraising, right? And so the question here is that, have we established that process? Have we improved that process? Have we reviewed that process? You could no longer rely on linear thinking. You have to do circular thinking. And so going back to that process formula of R plus R equals C, no? That's a process formula. C stands for consistency. The first R stands for repeatability. Once you've established that fundraising process, you can just repeat that. If a new staff joins the organization, you just ask them, do not reinvent the wheel. This process is working, just do it. The other R is reproducibility. If you start growing, you're now 10 to 20, make sure that that standard is consistently implemented. In the world of systems thinking, the enemy of quality is variation. Okay? The enemy of variation is the enemy of quality. And so we wanted to have consistency. So that's why, we adhere to that simple formula of R plus R equals C so we can predict results. Yeah, next slide, please. Okay, so in a nutshell, we can split this into 3 parts. So the first thing you need to do is to, next slide, please. The next thing to do is, just stay right there, okay, is to identify the inputs on the left. No? So what basically are your inputs? So for philanthropy, what are your most important inputs? Okay, the non-negotiables. Is it a policy? Is it a structure? Are these rules and responsibilities? Are these gap assessments? And what would be the desired result? By when? Okay, when do we want to achieve that? And the only way for us to really cross the gap or bridge the gap between inputs and outputs are the systems in between. And so from top management, middle management, operations, everybody thinks in a systems way. Looking at the PDCA approach. Like I said, there is no end. No, so next time around, you'd probably ask, maybe we need not really focus on this advocacy because we're not good at it. Or maybe we should focus on that. And you could not effectively attain that kind of level of thinking if you don't do systems thinking. All right? Linear thinking is like this. Okay, where is B coming from? Oh, it's from A. So where is C coming from? From B. And where is D coming from? From C. That's linear thinking. And there's a pitfall to that. You may probably miss other items in the ecosystem, for example. So, next slide, please. So, again, in standardization, regardless of whatever the standard is, so this one is ISO 26. This is a social accountability standard. Just kindly click on the button continuously. Yeah. So this is. So you look at the inputs on the left, and then the output on the right. You look at the different, these are all different elements of a system. as you can see, that works well together. No, so the challenge really here is that you need to constantly be thinking about all of these elements. And just go to the next slide, thank you. You need to constantly think of these different elements working together, right? Working within one another. No, so what I like about yesterday's presentation is that you all did mention about the importance of working closely with different stakeholders, and that's fantastic. I think that's key. So because before you do anything else, you also need to understand who your interested parties or stakeholders are. They can be external or internal. And one of the problems here is that organizations really focus externally only, and they tend to forget internal stakeholders as well. So we tend to forget we also have team working within us who will deliver value to the projects. And so, and when you miss on that, you'd probably have issues in competence, you'd probably have problems in hiring and all that. So the challenge here again is really looking at the entire structure. And people behave based on structure. So if you don't put structure there, people will also not behave accordingly. So when you put structure, you put system, people will just follow, right? Edwards Deming, the renowned American quality guru, he said that when there are non-conformances, we call it non-conformance. When there are non-conformances, the cause basically 80% of the time is system. But what organizations do is that they point their fingers to people. Why is that? Because it's the easiest thing to do. The people are the most visible ones. Maybe we didn't really exert effort, or maybe the approach is wrong and all of that. Maybe they did not appreciate. No? So, but when you look at it, 80% of these non-conformances, of these issues, of these problems are brought about by the system. And so what do? You don't just coach the people, the person, but go back and really dig deep into your system. What is it all about? Did it really consider all of these elements? And systems in ISO are also governed by principles, which you can see on your screen. So this one is on social accountability. So you're not new to this, right? So meaning when you design your system, you consider all of these elements. Next slide, please. And so going back to school, it also has different elements like focus on learners. What do they really want? We've been working with quite a good number of universities and colleges in the Philippines, so because they're required by the Commission on Higher Education to be certified to ISO 21001 from state universities, the private higher educational institutions, colleges, and because the regulators would really want them to implement systems thinking. To, of course, make a dent as far as improving quality of education in my country. And so we look at these principles. Yeah, can you continue, please? And we basically identify what elements can we take into consideration. Engagement of people, process approach, look at that. ISO is really all about the process. When you're certified, what's certified basically is the process. And improvement, evidence-based decision-making. Next slide, please. And of course, social responsibility and ethical conduct. So these are the bedrock foundations, so to speak, when we start analyzing how the school operates. No? Next slide, please. And data security and protection, because a learning organization or institution would basically capture a lot of data and information proprietary to the students, learners, faculty, staff, and all that. Yeah, next slide, please. And so very quickly, these are the requirements, or these are the elements within the system. Next slide, please. And so let me just dwell. I have about, I think, 3 minutes left. So this is where you can begin. No? So John, what do we do now? Where do we start? This is where you begin. So like I said, there are so many elements within one ISO standard, and this ISO standard is certifiable. So like I said earlier, it's kind of not really convincing if you tell people that, hey, I'm handsome or I'm beautiful, until someone else says that, hey, you're beautiful, right? That's the same approach. So, but how do you get that kind of feedback? By making sure that all of these elements are in place, and it's audited, and it's certified. So there's a third-party objective person goes to your organization and says, oh, wow, you have very good processes. It's conforming to these elements. So this is where you begin. Start looking at your 4.1. What is organization in this context? Well, like I said, to simplify this, look at where you're good at, okay? What are areas that needs improvement? Externally, what are opportunities out there? Externally, what are threats to your philanthropic initiatives? And then go to 4.2. who really are our customers here? From the corporate world, we always talk about clients, customers. In our case, it may not be probably customers. It would be the community, those who are in need of services that we could provide, those who own the problems that we can solve. Those are your interested parties. They could probably be the industry, the government, the marginalized, those with no access to water, education, healthcare. Those are your interested parties. And define clearly what do they need. Okay? No rocket science. And then 4.3, define your scope. Sometimes you try to attempt too many things. What really is your signature advocacy? Can you stick within that and you can stay within your alley? That's basically scope. And finally, in 4.4, these are your processes. Okay? So start coming up with an inventory of what do we need to have? What processes do we need to establish? So that even if we are sleeping and in Bangkok attending a conference, the office will run by itself. It is a leverage. When you have an established process, you can think of something else more productive to do and let the process run itself. Again, R plus R equals C. And my time is up, so let me just show you all of this. No? So diving deeper into this context, identify external, internal issues. Next slide, please. So you start with a simple SWOT analysis because all the elements would come from here. So make sure that you dive deep into this. No? So, and then, like I said, what's the desired goal? So agree on metrics. Is it amount of fund raised, impact achieved, communities transformed, life change, and all that. My respects to past district governor Philip Tan and past district Governor Mildred Bitangcol. We come from the Rotary family, and of course, I'm invited here by Dr. Glenda, who is also a Rotarian. I'll be leading Rotary district in the Philippines next year, and we start also with metrics. So it's the same thing. Next slide, please. And so there you go. So these are just examples. Now begin with the end in mind. Yeah, next slide, please. Okay, yeah. So this, okay, who would be your interested parties? Next slide. Yeah, just continue working. What's your scope? Yeah, just keep on clicking. Okay, and then these are different elements. Make sure there's policies, org structure. Yeah, next slide, please. And there it is. Now, 6.2, what would be your objectives, including risk? No? In ISO, we tell everyone to be paranoid. Okay? So you'd probably be, we trust in God. Yes, we also do that. No? In God we trust, but in everything else, show me the data. So there's even a book written by Andy Grove, former CEO of Intel. The title of the book is Only the Paranoid Survive. No? There are only two things in business, sales and everything else, right? So we make sure that everything or anything or all elements that could compromise results, we take that into consideration, we put in the risk registry. The same is true with the philanthropy. What can go wrong? You ask that question, okay? And then try to put controls there, whether it's financial, information security, or we're having poor enrollment. Is it bound to happen? We're having migration of faculty to state universities because pay is better there. All of these are risk. Okay, and then of course you document it. The next slide, please. Okay, and a lot of criteria on how you define the process. No, so I don't have time, unfortunately. And of course, make sure you have to audit it. Okay, so there's performance evaluation. In your philanthropy, think of 4 things when you evaluate it. Number 1 is monitor the key performance result. Agree on only one. What is it? Okay, I'm sure we're going to fight over that one most important KPI. But do that. Monitor it. Second is measure it. Actual versus target. Third is analyze it. Why is there a variance? Remember, variation is the enemy of consistency. And finally, evaluate it. You can only do that if you do internal audits. In ISO, the 3 systems audit work. Your first-party audit, a second-party audit, and a third-party audit. Then you're certified. Then you can say that, hey, I'm world-class. And lastly, is continual improvement. So just like the systems loop, it has no end. So once you have completed performance evaluation, it will go back to the plan again. Okay? And before you know it, you're transforming lives, you're building organizations, you're helping communities in a more robust, systemic way. Okay. And lastly, let me, okay, so this is again the system. Let's just leave that. The next slide, please. So this is the framework. This is a 30,000 feet overview of how ISO works in 15 minutes, okay? And let me leave you with this. No? So if you always do what you've always done, you always get what you've always got. Thank you very much.